Gina Farrell's new doctor had kind eyes, soft hands, a patient, authoritative voice. She trusted him even after he told her son, Karan, "Your mom's night terrors are getting worse. She could hurt herself or you if you don't act soon."
She stood on the sidewalk near the river and watched the snow fall. Unhurried, it drifted down among the glass and steel towers in fat flakes as wide as dimes to settle on a blanket of white so pure and unblemished that it would have been at home in a display window at Marshall Field's.
Chris, I love your story. I am a fan of Alfred Hitchcock. And
Oh, yes, yeah.
as I was reading this story, I envisioned like a lot of his shows are people in these impossible circumstances, still believing themselves to be one thing, primarily alive, still having the hope, still having the fight and so forth to get out of whatever the situation is. Like maybe they're in a pit that there are no ladders to climb out of, or there are no footholds to step into, and they're still fighting, they're still moving forward, they're still trying to do something, even though every time they try, they slide back down. And this really, really reminded me of that. That and the history, which I'll talk about in a minute, but I was just so once I started reading, I was like, oh, wait a minute. Green lights on Lower Wacker? What was, oh, okay. Um, so I really enjoyed it. And I want to know what inspired you. There's a two-parter, but I want to say something else. But what inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head with like the old Alfred Hitchcock Presents and like the old Twilight Zone because that's where I lived as a kid, right? Like, I would come home from school and I would watch, if Star Trek was on, I would watch that, but usually it was the old Twilight Zone, Outer
Mhm.
Limits, and then later as you got into the 90s in my adulthood, it was Tales from the Crypt and Tales from the Dark Side. We had this great kind of resurgence of anthology shows like in like the late 80s early 90s. So yeah, I mean, I think that maybe the snowfall was um drawn a little bit from a Twilight Zone episode where I'm trying to remember the name of it. Oh, Night of the Meek, where Art Carney plays this like department store Santa Claus who suddenly gets Santa's bag and he's able to fulfill the wishes of all the people who are on Skid Row, basically. And yeah, so I think that there was a little bit of that in there, but also, as I was thinking about doing a story about Chicago, I really wanted to delve into the history of it. And what better way to do that than with a little bit of time travel and a little bit of magic and a little bit of stuff that still isn't clear to the reader after they've, read that story.
How did you decide what historical places and situations you wanted to include in the story?
That was tough. I started with a big list of things that, in Chicago history, I'm like, okay, well, this is a huge moment. This is important. But then it really comes back to the characters. And once I understood what was happening with the main character who's a passenger in the cab, and then also with the cabbie, who is going to feel kind of familiar to people, hopefully, um, without necessarily giving too much away. Once I understood that character and where they were coming from, where that intersectionality was between them, that helped me to kind of pare down the events.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, but
Okay.
let's talk about your story for a minute here,
Okay,
because
sure.
like I was, it's called the Avalon Haint,
Mm-hmm.
and I was immediately struck by that title
Mm-hmm.
because when I think of Haints, I think of Southern magical traditions, Southern mythology, and I'm like, well, wait a minute, this is a story about Chicago. But then if you think about it for even just just a little tiny bit, you realize that all of those traditions have been brought into this like huge melting pot that Chicago is through the northern migration, right?
Right.
And I was wondering how much of that aspect of history was in mind as you were formulating the idea for this story.
hmm I actually thought about my father's oldest sister. We used to call her Auntie Big Sister. And she actually told, so I always had an understanding of my mom's side of the family, but my dad passed away when I was a baby, in a car accident. So the bits and pieces of history that I got from his side came through her. And there were things that she did. She had the colored bottles, she had the candles. Um, Her house seemed to be very magical at midnight for some reason.
Mhm.
But she also told us that our family on my dad's side, that they migrated from Louisiana to Mississippi. And so, I took all of those things and the things that she believed, the conjurings that with our minds, our very young minds, that, we couldn't discern whether or not it was truth or, fiction, that kind of thing. In our minds at the time, actually, it was just like very believable.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
To this day, there are still some things that I'm like, I can't explain that. So it came from that, but it emanates from um, spending my summers over near 12th Street. She lived near 12th Street. And just all of the people that I would meet in the situations, and just her way of resolving things that went beyond, calling the doctor or, calling the police or whatever. She had her ways of resolving things, and that's where it came from.